this podcast holds an ultimate place in my heart because it's the one that introduced me to podcasting. Hello, I'm Hayden Bloomfield and welcome to the channel. Podcasting, it's a wonderful medium. I absolutely love podcasts. You can learn so much and it's such a wonderful insight into conversations you would otherwise never be able to experience. So in this video, I want to dive through my 7+1 favourite podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis. You may be thinking, why is it not called my 8 favourite podcast? Stick around to the end and it will all make sense. What more to say than let's jump in. I actually love podcasting. I've started my own podcast that's been on pause that I'm now recording series 2 for Benevolent. Actually, that's not in my list. Maybe I should add my own podcast into my list, or is that a bit weird? But check it out and see if you like it. But my favourite podcast I listen to for different reasons. Generally, it's always because I'm out gardening or if I'm on a long drive. You can just absorb and learn so much. A lot of podcasts I listen to because I want to learn from business leaders, business owners, or around particular things on the environment. A lot of time just from various thought leaders, or into emerging technologies, other industries that I'm interested in or have recently learned about, especially around mindfulness, meditation, yoga. But also some I listen to just to like sit back, relax and unwind and just let my mind stop being so busy and stop being so focused. So I'll jump into my favourite 7+1 podcasts that I listen to. First and foremost, I think will always have the ultimate place on my list. These are not in any particular order, but I think this one podcast will always be like my top one. I think it was like the second podcast I listened to. But either way, that is Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. Started out as just him recording on his own in his flat or apartment wherever he lived, just reflects on his own journal. And if you've watched my video about journaling, you'll hear me say about some different alternatives that you can use for journaling. And like this can be a key component to it. You can podcast as your own journal. Just take some notes, have some bullet points to work with, and then just discuss them. Let your mind unravel. There's no rules, regulations to it. It hasn't got to be formative, it hasn't got to be informative. It can just be however you want to structure it. And that's how Diary of a CEO turned out, or started. And then it's grown into this huge platform where Stephen sits down with some of the most incredible people in business, in life, as thought leaders, and it's really delved into something more, and I really look forward to seeing what it becomes. And plus, he's got the Diary of a CEO Live that's coming up. I'm literally going, I don't know what day I'll release this video, but I'm going to see it on Monday in less than a week, so I'm really excited. It's a huge one for business, for personal growth, personal development, and as well just listening to people that seem so unreachable and untangible to be able to get a real dive and insight into their own minds and their own lives. So really great things to listen to there. Second on my list is, I think one of the most recent, is On Purpose with Jay Shetty. I hadn't even heard of Jay Shetty. Jay Shetty's like a global phenomenon. I hadn't heard of Jay Shetty until literally a few weeks ago. I don't know how, like knowing what I'm doing every day and my focus around health and mindset and feeling fulfilled and happy, you'd have thought I'd heard of Jay Shetty years ago, but never had. And what a phenomenal introduction that was, just discovering, I can't remember how I discovered him. I think it was just, he's always popped up on social media, always seen the name. It wasn't even usually a lot of podcasts I'd learn through or start listening to because they feature on a different podcast, but with Jay's it was purely a case of, I just saw so much content around him, I was like, okay, I'll look up his podcast and give it a listen. They're really phenomenal and some great conversations. Oftentimes, so like Jay's On Purpose podcast is a mix between him talking himself and having a guest. Generally, podcast structured like that, I always prefer the guest ones. And especially like in my own podcast recording, I haven't even released a podcast of me talking myself. If you think I should, let me know in the comments below. Whereas Jay's, I actually prefer when he dives into it himself and does his own personal reflections in his own episodes on a solo. So that's quite interesting. So it shows the power he holds in his words of wisdom. Very wise wisdom. Wise wisdom? Next on my list, as I said, no particular order, but next is the Lex Friedman podcast. And when you think about podcasting, I think Lex Friedman could be a huge inspiration for anyone wanting to get started in a sort of ironic way. And I don't want this to sound bad, but like as in, when you think of like what you need to do, the boxes you need to tick as a content creator, I think this really demonstrates that authenticity and consistency is the key to it. And just having value. Because when you listen to Lex Friedman, he's not overly expressive and he's very monotoned and it's very flat, I would say, and he's always in the same ish, like, right, I'm just going to wear my black suit, black tie, straight to the point. The quality is in the conversation. It's nothing to do with anything extravagant. It's not about having the best mic, the best camera. I mean, he's got great equipment and everything, but it's not around, I need to do this with my voice, I need to do this with presentation, I need to be clickbaiting this. It's just like, here's me having a conversation with X, Y, Z. And he's had some of the most phenomenal, and as well, he's able to break the rules with podcasting, and he's able to get guests on there that no one else can have, and he's able to have them for longer than you'd ever imagine. Like, he's had multiple episodes with Elon Musk where they've sat down for 2.5, 3 hours, and they are phenomenal. Yeah, you try and get a guest on a podcast, you're often struggling for like half an hour, let alone an hour, and yet Lex Friedman's able to achieve 3 hours with some incredible people you'd think would never be reachable, would never sit down and give their time. But that's wonderful and it's absolutely amazing. Where I said like this is one of the key beautiful things about podcasting is that insight to those conversations. Imagine like before podcasting, before Web 2, when we could share all this content, photos, videos, audio through the internet, we could never access. These people would just be in our lives based on what we read in the papers. You'd never be able to sit down and like, or interviews they'd have on like the TV, where it's just quick, snappy, oh, what's the latest thing you're doing, what's the new release, oh, I heard about this, oh, you and so-and-so split up. No depth to it, it's just all very surface level, whereas in podcasting it goes so much deeper than that. There's the tip of the iceberg, and podcasting really breaks down below the surface to get into all those nitty-gritty details and dive into their mind, what works for them, what doesn't, what's been their challenges, and Lex Friedman really manages to achieve that. Next on the list is actually the first podcast I ever listened to. This is what introduced me to podcasting. I never even listened to a single podcast before this. I can't even think how long ago it was. And this all came from, I made a video recently on BNI and my experience there. I started listening to podcasts because I was in BNI. Someone I spoke to, he worked at Buckmore Park and his boss had a podcast he was a producer of. And that is Secret Leaders, hosted by Dan Morissette, and this was when he was working, I don't know if Rich still is on it, but Rich Martell was the producer. They had a number of live events in London, and it was their first live event that I went along to, helped them set up and everything, just arrived early, and it was really, that was my introduction. I didn't know anything, as I said. Started listening to podcasting from there and was absolutely blown away by it. The idea that you could have these conversations, and instantly was like, I need to do something along these lines. It's amazing. Went along to the live event and I just jumped on every live event, showed up really early, just helped them set up. I was there before them most of the time, just like helping set up, and it was really wonderful. And then to go from like seeing this audio podcast and then seeing something that's live and having those conversations in person. I remember the guests sitting down and being like, oh, listen to that conversation. That I'm eternally grateful for like this podcast holds an ultimate place in my heart because it's the one that introduced me to podcasting and it's what inspired me fundamentally to start my podcast. So huge shout out to Dan Morissette and Rich Martell because they're the reasons essentially that I started podcasting, that I started listening to podcasts, and it's really that I kind of started content creating, I guess, because it all stemmed from that. Next on the list is another wonderful podcast, and this, while the ones I've been talking about so far have been a lot around business, maybe Jay Shetty's breaking the boundaries there a bit more onto health and personal mindset, but a lot of discussions with business leaders, whereas this next podcast is more around personal development and really diving into more spirituality and just inner fulfillment, contentment and happiness, and that is Happy Place with Fern Cotton. It is a wonderful conversation. I love the open honesty. Like having a guest on with this, you really go into the reality of their lives, not like ignore the framework of reality TV. This is like the real reality of their lives, their existence, and it's something, it really breaks the barriers between the idea of celebrity and like ordinary human. I think it has for me anyway. Like some of the guests that are on there, you only see through the medium of TV. They seem like these big stars, millions of followers, lots of fame, paparazzi always around them. So I guess in your heads, well for me, they've been on this kind of pedestal of like, oh, that's a different kind of person, they're a different level, they're famous, they're wealthy, they're rich, all these things, and therefore they're different to me. Whether or not that means they're better or not, but just they are something different. Whereas on Happy Place, Fern manages to just eradicate that barrier, and it's just two people having a conversation, having a wonderful conversation where you are able to listen in and learn and really dive into like their own experience. And so many guests I sit and listen to, and I may have an opinion on them, I may really like them, or I may have I suppose we all have prejudice in our own minds, and I'll have this prejudice of like, oh, they're just this person, they're nice and jolly and they're happy and they've just probably had it easy and introduced into radio, TV, whatever from a young age and just had it easy going. Or certain person I'm like, I don't really like you, but then I listen to the podcast and I just think, whoa, this is really interesting. I've never realised I have so much more respect for you, and hearing your story and what your struggles have been, what your experiences have been, what you've learned from and how you've moved on from these life moments is really extraordinary. So I really recommend it. It's a wonderful podcast to listen to. It really does a lot to uplift you and make you feel more positive. So shout out there to Happy Place because it's a really nice podcast. Plus you've always got Fern's books as well that are linking now towards Happy Place as its own brand. So I'm currently reading Bigger Than Us after going to the live event, which I made a video on. I'm totally not going to put any cards in this video because I have been mentioning so many other videos of mine. just go through the channel, and if you like the channel, subscribe to it. Next, I learned this podcast because I was listening to another podcast. I was listening to Diary of a CEO. This person came on as a guest, I then thought I'd give their podcast a go because they were so wonderful and they speak so eloquently and as well just speak so calmly with so much passion and compassion in their voice. You just feel like when they talk it's from their heart. And that is Mo Gaudat. And that's Slow Mo with Mo Gaudat. And that really is just, call it peaceful tranquility. Listen to his podcast, it's called Slow Mo. You slow down at how busy you are. I always listen to these when I'm gardening, so it's like I'm rushing around getting these gardens done, and then in my head I'm just like... So it's really wonderful, and you learn a lot, and again, like some of the guests he's got on there are unbelievable. So I highly recommend it. Last on my list of 7, but remember it's 7 plus 1. So last on my list is actually completely different in terms of what I'm listening to. So a lot of these, as I've run through, you tell, they're all around personal development, business development. It's about conversations with people, listening to business leaders, thought leaders, learning so much around your own mindset, fulfillment, contentment, happiness, business, and so much more. Whereas this last one takes a completely different turn. And also I learned about it in a completely different way through TikTok. Well, I learned it through Morgan, my girlfriend, and she got it through TikTok, just coming up, scrolling through on one of her many TikTok spirals one evening, and she just kept seeing highlights of this podcast. It was like on a drive back from Cornwall, we decided to listen to a couple episodes, and then sure enough I decided to go back and listen to every single episode, and now I listen to every episode each week when it's released. That is 2 hot takes with Morgan, and I'm gonna, not my girlfriend Morgan, different Morgan, I'm gonna hopefully not ruin her surname, Absher. 2 hot takes with Morgan Absher. I hope I've said that right. But this is just Morgan host sitting down with either her boyfriend or friends, going through Reddit stories and looking at different elements within relationships, life, various scenarios, some of the arsehole situations, or who's right and who's wrong here, and how to deal with these situations. And it does a lot. It really helps, I suppose. It is an element of personal development, but this I love to listen to because it's just about switching off. There's no pressure. It's not about what can I learn from this. It's just I'm going to be entertained and it's going to be great. I'm probably going to laugh, probably going to cry. And I love the fact that it's such a simple strategy, really effective, works really well. It's grown unbelievably fast. I'd love to know the insights of how that happened because it's worked really well. But the simplicity of it, and also the fact that they have different focuses within each episode. So it'll be like the Christmas episode, the Thanksgiving episode, the love, the fulfillment episodes, the heartbreak episode. So I think that's really wonderful, and you get a lot of entertainment from it and a lot of sparking emotions. So it's really recommend it for just a time when you're just being breezy, chilling, and there's no pressure. You don't really want to absorb as much knowledge as you possibly can. It's just about having something really pleasant to listen to and really wonderful, and get 2 hot takes on a situation. Also, it's quite interesting to listen to it and then have your own thoughts around it. I love the idea of someone creating a podcast that's responding to this podcast. So it's just like they sit down and listen to this podcast and then add their own hot takes to 2 hot takes of a story. So someone wants some inspiration there, create that podcast. And lastly, why is it 7 plus 1? So this 8th podcast is just, I've only listened to 1 episode and it was really interesting. It was about fasting, 2 doctors discussing fasting. And the reason it's 7 plus 1 is because I wouldn't put it on my list because I've only listened to it once, but it's something that just from 1 episode found so much insight and so much knowledge. Really, really interesting. And I'm really going to try not to ruin your name, so apologies if I get it wrong if you ever hear this. And that is Feel Better, Live More with Dr. Rajan Chatterjee. Hopefully I've said that right. But you listen to a doctor with his episode each week. Wonderful conversation. As I said, the only episode I've listened to so far is with another doctor about fasting, talking about the health benefits and the way, especially around diabetes and other health conditions, heart problems, around how fasting properly with the right nutrition can do so much to benefit your body internally and help you become a lot healthier and happier. So it's something I'll definitely be diving into a lot more of in the coming months. But yeah, there's my 7 plus 1 favourite podcasts. Hope they've been helpful. And if it has, make sure to like the video. Comment your favourite podcast below. What is your favourite? Do you listen to podcasts? If so, what am I missing out on? What should I add to my list while I'm out gardening or on my long drives? What should I be listening to? Let me know. And if you have enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to get plenty more videos on podcast, business, mindfulness, happiness, trading, investing, sustainability, ethical wealth, and much more. So I'll see you in the next one. Till next time, bye.